morning. I thought we'd sit outside today and enjoy the outdoors and the cool breeze. So I think we've all had enough of being inside. Chapter 2, Farewell Australia. The 9th Battalion spent 3 weeks in and around Melbourne completing further training and honing its military skills before boarding Omra once again. This time the men were bound for Albany in Western Australia, where a week spent at anchor in King George Sound added to what a good proportion of the men now regarded as the necessary monotony of shipboard life. On the morning of 1 November, however, the routine was broken, and Omra and the 37 other troop ships that comprised the first convoy finally set sail across the Indian Ocean, bound for England. The convoy was protected by the Australian warships HMAS Sydney and Melbourne, assisted by British cruiser HMS Minotaur, and an elegant and distinctive Japanese warship, Ibuki. Frank watched with some apprehension as the west coast of Australia was swallowed by the sea mist. The following morning found the men well on their way. The undulating hills, trees and scrub around Roma, which extended as far as the eye could see, had given way to a different expanse. White-capped, blue ocean, which stretched unbroken to the far horizon. While the change in scenery was novel, Frank was already suffering the effects of the cramped life aboard the Old Orient Company steamer. Rough weather had made drill and sports difficult in the first few days at sea, and a number of the troops had been laid low by seasickness. On the morning of 9 November, while training on the ship's deck, Frank watched with interest as HMAS Melbourne and Ibuki moved from their usual positions and took up stations on the left side of the convoy. At the same time, Sydney raced westward at speed, smoke pouring from her funnels. The well-informed James Hunter suspected it had something to do with the German light cruiser SMS Emden, a raider which had captured and sunk many Allied merchant ships in the Indian Ocean. A little while later, an article appeared on the deck notice board describing a naval battle close to the Cocos Islands, some 50 miles to the west, in which HMAS Sydney had defeated Emden. Life returned to normal the following day, and thoughts of Emden was dispelled by drills, lectures and fatigues. On 15 November, several of the ships, including Omra, docked at Colombo in Ceylon to take on water and coal. The next day, a different load was taken on board in the form of 44 survivors from Emden, whom the 9th Battalion provided a guard of 60 men, including Frank, Harley and Hunter. As the Germans came aboard, Frank observed that some of the sailors were mere teenagers, and that a number of the prisoners were wounded. The guard detail remained on duty for the duration of the voyage, with each detail of 12 men spending 2 hours on duty and 8 hours off. During his periods on guard duty, Frank chatted freely with the German sailors, many of whom spoke fluent English, occasionally swapping souvenirs. At the end of November, rumours spread throughout the ship of a change in destination. The popular opinion was that the men were to be diverted to Egypt for training instead of proceeding to England as originally planned. Frank was disappointed, as he had intended to visit some relatives, and Hunter had promised to take him to Scotland to meet his family. The rumours proved correct, and Omra arrived at Suez on 1 December, sailing through the famous canal. After a brief stay at Port Said, she sailed for Alexandria, finally docking on 6 December. Having spent more than a month aboard the ship, Frank was grateful to bid farewell to Omra later that afternoon. The troops boarded a train bound for Cairo, travelling alongside the famous Nile River as they headed for the Egyptian capital. From Cairo they travelled to Mena camp in open electric tram cars, arriving after darkness had fallen. To Frank's delight, the pyramids appeared quite close and were clearly visible in the bright moonlight. He was now desperate for some leave so that he could explore them and see more of this ancient country which held so much fascination. For the remainder of the year, the men were kept busy training and completely exhausting day-long route marches into the vast expanse of sand and jagged rocks. They trained for at least 8 hours every day except Sundays. Each day the battalion would divide into its respective companies, and each company would march to its allotted training area in the desert. The D Company men following Captain Melbourne and Lieutenants Roberts and Fortescue. They drilled up and down in the sand, shot at the range, and assembled to listen to their lectures from their officers. The sun scorched their skin during the day, and the cold desert nights chilled them to the bone. There were frequent sandstorms, and the men's eyes watered as the windswept grains lashed their reddening cheeks. They occasionally tied a handkerchief over their faces, but this offered little respite, Frank noting in a letter home that it only served to make the men look like a mob of bushrangers ready to hold up a Cobb & Co. coach. Christmas 1914 was Frank's first away from home, and his thoughts drifted to his family's traditional celebrations. As he sat in the YMCA tent at Menor and wrote a letter to his family, he pictured them all heading to church in the morning, then back home exchanging presents and enjoying a roast dinner. The Queensland Patriotic Fund was determined to show the soldiers that they had not been forgotten that Christmas morning as they camped out in the Egyptian desert, and every man received a box of sweets with the inscription, "Queensland's thoughts are ever with you." The battalion bands wandered around the camp playing festive songs all through the morning, and the men sang traditional carols during the church services. This was to be their last Christmas of innocence, with its thoughts of peace and goodwill to all men. As you can see, that was a much shorter chapter, and they're few and far between, I can tell you, judging by the size of the book. But I'm glad that you're able to join with me, and I hope you can then come back for chapter 3, and as we talk about the new year into 1915 and what it held for these boys. I hope you can keep on joining me as we progress through the book, and if you are enjoying it and want to keep following along, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you for chapter 3. Thank you.